The night was quiet, the kind of silence that sits heavy on the streets after midnight. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the faint hum of streetlights and the occasional car passing through the quiet neighborhood. Officer Jensen sat in his patrol car at the corner of Birchwood Avenue, watching the road ahead. His shift had been long, routine, and uneventful, the kind of night that made time feel slower than usual. He leaned back in his seat, sipping from a cup of lukewarm coffee, his eyes moving lazily from one car to another. The neighborhood wasn't known for trouble. It was a well-kept, mostly quiet area where people usually waved at officers instead of avoiding them. Still, Jensen liked to think of himself as alert, the kind of cop who could spot when something didn't fit. That's when he saw it, a dark SUV turning onto Birchwood. The vehicle moved slowly, too slowly for his liking. It was new, shiny, the kind of car that didn't belong to someone who lived in these older houses. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. Inside, he saw a woman driving alone. He couldn't see much else, but something in his chest tightened. An instinct, or at least that's what he told himself. "What's she doing here this late?" he muttered under his breath. He watched as the SUV rolled past the street corner, signaling properly, stopping at every sign. There was nothing wrong, no traffic violation, no reason to act. But Jensen's thoughts kept circling back to the same thing. She didn't look like she belonged here. His hand moved automatically to his radio, but he stopped himself. No call needed. He could handle it. He turned on his headlights and began to follow her. The tires rolled softly over the pavement as he kept a steady distance. The SUV made another right turn, heading toward the next block. Jensen noticed the woman glancing in her rearview mirror, probably realizing she was being followed. He didn't care. He flicked on his red and blue lights, the familiar flash bouncing off the houses. The SUV slowed and pulled over near the curb. The woman's movements were calm, measured. She put the car in park and rested her hands on the steering wheel. Jensen parked behind her, adjusting his belt before stepping out. The chill in the air brushed against his face as he approached. He tapped the flashlight against his palm, shining it through the window. The woman turned her head slightly toward him. Her face was calm, eyes focused. She didn't look scared, more surprised, maybe even curious. "Good evening, officer," she said politely, her voice steady. Jensen frowned slightly. He didn't expect that tone, not nervous, not defensive, just steady. "License and registration," he said, keeping his voice firm. "Of course," she replied, reaching slowly toward the glove compartment. "Can I ask why you stopped me?" He hesitated. He hadn't thought that far. There wasn't a real reason, but he didn't want to admit that. "Routine check," he said flatly. She nodded, her hands moving with care. Every action was deliberate, almost rehearsed, like she knew exactly how to behave during a stop. She handed him her license and registration. Jensen took them, shining his flashlight over the information. Everything looked fine. Her name was printed clearly, local address. Everything was in order. Still, something inside him wouldn't settle. He couldn't shake the thought that there was more to this woman, something off. Maybe it was the confidence in her voice or the way she looked directly at him without flinching. "You live around here?" he asked. "Yes, officer." "Just a few blocks away," she said calmly. "This your car?" "Yes, it is." He glanced at her again. She wore a simple dark jacket, hair neatly tied back, posture straight. Nothing about her looked suspicious. Yet Jensen felt an uneasy irritation building in him, as if her calmness was some kind of challenge. "You mind stepping out of the vehicle?" he asked suddenly. She looked surprised but didn't argue. "May I ask why?" "Just standard procedure," he said quickly, not meeting her eyes. She nodded once and opened the door slowly. As she stepped out, the light from the street lamp revealed her face clearly. Jensen caught himself staring, not out of attraction, but because she carried herself with a quiet authority. There was something about the way she stood, composed but firm, that unsettled him. He tried to ignore the feeling. "You been drinking tonight?" "No, sir." "Any weapons in the vehicle?" "No, sir." Her answers were clear, polite, respectful. But instead of calming him, they made him more agitated. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was her confidence. It didn't fit the picture he had drawn in his head when he first saw her car. He circled the SUV, shining his flashlight along the windows, pretending to inspect it. Everything was spotless, he knew it. Still, he lingered, searching for something that would justify the stop. He felt her watching him, and that made him tense up. "Officer, is there a problem?" she asked softly. He turned, a flash of irritation in his eyes. I'll ask the questions, ma'am. She nodded, folding her arms gently, not out of defiance, but as if she were simply waiting. There was no fear in her stance, no trembling in her voice. Jensen didn't like that. He was used to people being nervous, apologetic, even defensive. But she wasn't any of those things. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You from around here, huh? You said a few blocks away? That's right. What brings you out this late? Work, she said simply. What kind of work? Public service, he raised a brow. Public service? Like what, City Hall? Something like that. Her tone was calm, but Jensen felt it again. That sense that she was holding something back, not in a suspicious way, but in a way that suggested she didn't owe him an explanation. He didn't like that feeling of not being in control. He crossed his arms, the badge on his chest catching the light. You seem awful confident for someone being stopped by the police. Should I be nervous? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air for a moment. Jensen didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to calm, direct questions like that. Usually people fumbled for words, apologized, tried to please him. But she stood there, meeting his eyes without fear. He took a slow breath, trying to regain his sense of authority. Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. I understand, she said softly. And I appreciate officers who do their job well. Her tone wasn't sarcastic. It was sincere, and somehow that made it worse. He felt something stir inside him, a mix of defensiveness and confusion. Why did she sound like she was the one in control of the situation? The radio on his shoulder crackled, breaking the silence. Another officer called in a minor disturbance on the other side of town. Jensen hesitated, his hand hovering over the mic. He knew he should clear the stop and move on. There was no reason to keep her there. But something in him refused to let it go. He didn't want to walk away looking wrong. Not tonight. He turned back to her. Mind popping the trunk? Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Is there a reason, officer? He exhaled sharply. Just routine check. She didn't move right away. Instead, she looked at him, really looked at him as if trying to read his face. For a brief moment, her expression softened, almost like she understood something he didn't want her to see. Then she gave a small nod and moved to open the trunk. The interior light came on, revealing a neat, organized space. A briefcase, a folded coat, and a few folders stacked neatly. Nothing out of the ordinary. Jensen stared for a few seconds, his jaw tightening. He knew there was nothing here. He knew he had made a mistake, but admitting it felt impossible. He closed the trunk quietly. The woman stood by the driver's door, waiting patiently. Can I go now, officer? She asked gently. He looked at her, his mind spinning for a reason to prolong this moment. There was none. The street was empty, the night colder now. He felt the weight of silence pressing in on him. Finally, he nodded. Yeah, you can go. She gave him a polite smile. Not smug, not angry, just a quiet acknowledgement, and got back into her car. As she drove off, Jensen stood there under the flickering streetlight, feeling something he couldn't name. Guilt? Maybe. Or the slow realization that he had seen the world through the wrong lens. He didn't know yet who she really was. He didn't know that this encounter would change everything. For now, he just stood there, staring at the fading red glow of her taillights, wondering why he felt so small. The next evening, the streets were just as still as before. The glow of the streetlight stretched across the road, soft and pale, painting long shadows on the pavement. Officer Jensen was back on duty, driving through the same part of town where he had stopped the woman the night before. He hadn't told anyone about that stop. He couldn't explain why it kept replaying in his head. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't tell if it was guilt or pride. He told himself he had done nothing wrong. He was just doing his job. But deep down, he knew there was more to it. The way she looked at him, steady, calm, unafraid, had shaken something in him. He didn't want to admit that. As he drove past the same street corner, his mind drifted. He didn't see her car, but the memory of her voice was still fresh. Should I be nervous? She had asked. That question had followed him home, into his dreams, and now, back into his patrol car. His partner, a younger officer named Collins, sat in the passenger seat. You good, man? Collins asked, noticing Jensen's quiet mood. Yeah, just tired, Jensen said. You sure? You look like you saw a ghost. Jensen forced a small laugh. Just thinking about last night. That stop on Birchwood? Collins asked. Heard dispatch mention you checked out a black SUV. Anything happen? Jensen shook his head. Nah, just routine. Collins nodded, leaning back in his seat. Routine, huh? You always say that when something's on your mind. Jensen didn't reply. He turned the wheel, letting the silence fill the car again. He tried to push the thought away, but it clung to him like fog. An hour later, a call came through the radio. There was an argument reported at a gas station near the edge of town. Nothing serious, just a heated exchange between a customer and an attendant. Jensen and Collins were the closest unit, so they responded. When they arrived, the gas station was quiet again. The argument had ended, but a small group of people lingered outside, talking softly. Jensen stepped out of the car, scanning the scene. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and night rain. Inside the store, the attendant explained that everything was fine now. The woman who had been arguing had already left. Jensen nodded, writing a few quick notes. As he stepped back outside, he noticed a familiar SUV parked by the far pump. His stomach tightened. It was her car. She stood by the pump, filling her tank, dressed in a plain gray coat this time. Her hair was tied back again, and even under the harsh gas station lights, her expression was calm and focused. She saw him approaching, but didn't move. Her eyes met his, not with anger, but with quiet recognition. "Evening, officer," she said politely. Jensen stopped a few feet away. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to apologize, but the words wouldn't come. The other part wanted to prove he had been right to stop her, even though he knew he hadn't been. "You again," he said finally. "Yes," she said with a small nod. "Looks like we meet again." Her voice was steady, the same as before. There was no anger, no accusation. She didn't bring up what happened the previous night, and that somehow made him more uneasy. "Everything okay here?" he asked, pretending to check around. "Everything is fine," she said. "Just getting gas before heading home." Collins walked over, curious. "You know her?" he asked quietly. Jensen gave a quick nod. "Yeah, I stopped her last night." Routine check. The woman gave a faint smile, not sarcastic, but knowing. "I remember. You said that." Collins looked between them, sensing tension. "Well, glad everything's peaceful tonight." "Yes," she said kindly. "Peace is good." Her words hung in the air, simple but meaningful. Jensen couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she let on. There was something about her presence that commanded quiet respect. Even Collins seemed to feel it. When she finished pumping gas, she closed the cap and straightened up. Before getting into her car, she looked at Jensen again. "You have a good night, officer," she said gently. He nodded awkwardly, mumbling, "Yeah, you too." She got in her car and drove off, her taillights fading into the distance once again. Jensen stood there watching her go, the same uneasy feeling stirring inside him. "What was that about?" Collins asked. "Nothing," Jensen said quietly. "Just someone who keeps crossing my path." They got back in the patrol car and drove off, the night swallowing the sound of their tires. Jensen didn't say much for the rest of the shift. He couldn't stop thinking about her tone, her calmness, her eyes that seemed to see through him. By the next morning, word had spread through the department. Not about her specifically, but about a new police chief starting soon. The news was everywhere, someone with years of experience known for fairness and strong leadership. Jensen didn't pay much attention at first. He was too tired, too distracted by the past 2 nights. When he got home, he tried to shake it off. He turned on the TV, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face. The way she looked at him with that calm confidence, like she wasn't afraid of anything. The next week, the station was buzzing. Officers were cleaning their uniforms, checking their badges, preparing for the arrival of the new chief. Everyone was curious, whispering about her background. Jensen listened quietly, half interested, until he heard someone mention where she had transferred from, a nearby city with a reputation for tough reform work. She was known for discipline, fairness, and expecting the same from her officers. When the morning of her introduction came, Jensen stood among the line of officers gathered in the briefing room. The air was filled with low chatter. Then as the doors opened, the room went silent. She walked in. The same woman from the SUV. Jensen felt his stomach drop. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. But it was real. She stood at the front of the room, her posture straight, her presence calm and commanding. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "I'm honored to join this department as your new chief of police." The room was silent. Jensen felt frozen in place. Collins shot him a look of disbelief, whispering, "That's her?" Jensen didn't answer. He couldn't. He felt every muscle in his body tighten as she continued to speak. "I believe in integrity, in fairness, and in accountability," she said, her eyes sweeping across the room. "Every person we meet deserves respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. That's not just a rule, it's the foundation of good policing." Her words were calm, not harsh, but Jensen felt them land like stones in his chest. Every sentence felt like it was aimed directly at him. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. She didn't call him out by name, but her gaze lingered near his direction for just a moment, long enough to make his heart race. When the meeting ended, officers clapped politely. Jensen stayed still, his mind spinning. As everyone started to file out, she approached the small group where he stood. His throat tightened. "Officer Jensen," she said softly, her tone neutral. He swallowed hard. "Yes, Chief. We've met before," she said. He nodded slowly, feeling his face grow warm. "Yes, ma'am. I thought so," she said. Her expression didn't show anger or resentment, just quiet composure. "I'm glad to see you here. We'll be working closely together to make sure this department represents the best of what it can be." He didn't know what to say. His mouth went dry. "Yes, Chief." She gave a faint smile, not cruel but full of meaning, and walked away, leaving Jensen standing there, speechless. As she disappeared down the hallway, Collins turned to him. "Man, that's the same woman from the gas station, isn't it?" Jensen nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's her." Collins let out a low whistle. "You picked the wrong person to mess with." Jensen didn't respond. He just stared down at the floor, the weight of realization settling deeper with every breath. The woman he had stopped without reason, the one he had treated like she didn't belong, was now the leader of the department. And she remembered everything. That night, when Jensen got home, he didn't sleep. He sat in silence, thinking about how quickly a moment can change everything. The next time he saw her, he knew things would never be the same. The first week under the new chief was tense. Every officer in the department was on edge, trying to make a good impression. The hallways were quieter, the morning briefings sharper. Everyone could tell that she wasn't like the chiefs they had before. She didn't raise her voice or throw her weight around. She didn't have to. Her calmness carried authority. When she walked into a room, people straightened up without thinking about it. Officer Jensen tried to stay invisible. He came in early, did his work, and left as soon as his shift ended. But no matter how much he tried to avoid her, he could feel her presence everywhere. Her name came up in every conversation. How she was changing the reporting system, improving patrol procedures, and focusing on community trust. Some officers liked it. Others grumbled quietly. Jensen didn't know how to feel. He respected her, but he couldn't shake the memory of that night. One morning, during roll call, the chief stood in front of the team. Her uniform was crisp, her tone even. "We are here to serve the community," she said. "Not control it, not judge it. Every person we meet deserves our respect. I expect that from all of you." Her eyes moved slowly across the room, meeting each face. When they passed over Jensen, he felt his chest tighten. She didn't stop or say anything, but he knew she remembered. That single glance reminded him of everything he had done wrong. After the meeting, she called him into her office. The other officers noticed, giving him quick looks of curiosity and sympathy as he walked past. Her office was neat, not decorated with awards or trophies like the old chief's had been. Instead, there were photos of community events, kids at a park, volunteers at a food drive, and officers helping at a neighborhood fair. The sunlight came through the blinds, landing softly on her desk. She gestured for him to sit. "Officer Jensen," she said, her tone steady but not cold. "Yes, Chief," he replied, sitting upright. "I wanted to talk about something important," she began, "not about paperwork or cases. About perspective." He nodded, unsure where this was going. "You've been with the department for a while," she said. "You know the streets, you know the people. But I want to ask you, what do you see when you look at someone on a stop?" He blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I see their behavior, I guess. I look for signs of trouble," she nodded slowly. "Do you ever look for signs of understanding?" He hesitated. "I don't know what you mean." She leaned forward slightly. "We're taught to look for danger to protect ourselves. That's part of the job. But when that becomes the only thing we see, we stop seeing people as people. We start seeing them as threats. Her words were calm, but they hit him harder than he expected. He swallowed, trying to respond. I try to treat everyone fairly. I believe you do, she said gently. But sometimes even good officers let fear and bias shape how they act. It happens to all of us at some point. What matters is what we do when we realize it. He looked down, his throat tight. You're talking about that night, aren't you? She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched just long enough for him to feel his chest grow heavy. Yes, she said finally. I am, he nodded slowly, his voice low. I shouldn't have stopped you. I know that now. She didn't nod or smile. She just watched him quietly. I wasn't angry that night, she said. Disappointed maybe, but not angry. I've seen that kind of thing before, too many times. It's not about me. It's about what it says about the system we work in. He looked up, surprised. You're not holding it against me? I'm holding you accountable, she said simply. That's different. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. There was no harshness in her tone, just truth. For a moment, the air between them felt heavy but not hostile, just honest. I want to give you a chance to see something, she said, standing up. Tomorrow morning you're joining me for a community patrol. His eyebrows lifted. With you, Chief? Yes, we'll walk the neighborhood. No car, no radio chatter, just conversations. He nodded, though part of him was nervous. Understood. When he left her office, the other officers looked curious. Everything okay? Collins asked. Yeah, Jensen said quietly. Just different. The next morning was bright and warm. The chief was already waiting by the station entrance, wearing her uniform but without her jacket, making her look approachable. Jensen joined her, unsure what to expect. They walked through the neighborhood streets, greeting people as they passed. Kids played on bikes, shop owners swept sidewalks, and neighbors waved. Jensen noticed how easily she talked to everyone. She knew names, remembered details, asked questions that showed she cared. Morning, Chief, one shopkeeper said with a smile. Glad to see you out here. Always good to stop by, she replied warmly. How's business this week? Jensen followed quietly, feeling a little out of place. He wasn't used to this kind of policing, the kind without tension or command. But as he watched her, something shifted inside him. The way people looked at her wasn't out of fear. It was respect, trust. They stopped by a small playground. A young boy waved shyly at them. The chief smiled and waved back. He always comes here after school, she said softly. His mother works 2 jobs. The least we can do is make sure he feels safe here. Jensen nodded, looking around the park. Never thought about it like that, he admitted. She smiled faintly. That's why we're here. To make people feel safe, not scared. As they walked back, she said, You have potential, Jensen. You're experienced, and people listen to you. I want to see you grow into the kind of officer who earns trust, not just authority. He looked at her, humbled. Thank you, Chief, I'll try. She stopped and turned to face him fully. Don't just try, do better. Start by asking questions before making assumptions. Her tone was soft but firm. He nodded again, this time with more conviction. Yes, Chief. For the rest of the week, Jensen couldn't stop thinking about that patrol. He realized how different the city looked when you walked instead of drove, how people opened up when you listened instead of ordered. He started talking to residents more, not as an officer checking on them, but as a person. One evening, while driving home, he saw a car pulled over with a flat tire. A woman stood beside it, frustrated but calm. Jensen pulled over to help. When she turned, she looked wary, probably expecting the worst. But instead of giving commands, he smiled gently and asked, Need a hand? Her expression softened with relief. That would be nice, thank you. He helped her change the tire, chatting casually. It wasn't much, but it felt different. Human. When she thanked him and drove away, he realized how simple kindness could change a moment. The next morning, he stopped by the chief's office. She looked up from her desk. Morning, Jensen. Morning, Chief, he said. I just wanted to say thank you. For the talk, for the patrol. It made me think, she smiled slightly. That's all I wanted. As he left, he felt something new inside him, a mix of humility and hope. Maybe he couldn't change the past, but he could change what came next. Later that day, a call came in about a minor disturbance at a nearby cafe. Jensen responded with Collins. When they arrived, the situation was calm, just a misunderstanding over a bill. Jensen handled it carefully, speaking softly, listening first. The customers relaxed, and the issue resolved quickly. As they left, Collins grinned. "You're different lately," he said. "Maybe," Jensen said with a small smile. "Just trying to see people the right way." When they got back to the station, the chief was standing by the entrance talking to another officer. She glanced up and caught Jensen's eye. For a moment, they just exchanged a quiet nod. No words, no speeches, just a silent understanding. That night, Jensen sat at his kitchen table again. But this time, he didn't feel that same heavy guilt. Instead, he felt something lighter, like the beginning of change. The memory of that first night was still there, but it no longer haunted him. It reminded him. He knew there was still a long way to go, but now, for the first time, he believed he could become the kind of officer who made the badge mean something good again. The night air was heavy with tension. No one spoke for a long moment. The sound of the woman's calm breathing was the only thing that seemed real after everything that had just happened. The other officers who had rushed to the scene stood in uneasy silence. The streetlights flickered above them, throwing long shadows across the ground. The officer who had lost control moments ago could barely meet her eyes. His hands trembled slightly, his heart racing faster than his thoughts could keep up. He had been sure of himself when he made the stop, too sure maybe. But now, standing before the woman he had just wronged, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Everything he thought he understood about power, authority, and respect had changed in an instant. The woman's voice was calm when she finally spoke. "I'm giving you a chance to take a breath," she said softly. "Do it before you make another mistake." Her words weren't harsh, but they carried the weight of command. She wasn't trying to humiliate him. She was reminding everyone watching what leadership looked like. A few of the younger officers shifted uncomfortably. They had heard rumors that a new chief was coming, someone with a strong record, someone who wanted to change how the department worked. But none of them had expected to meet her like this in the middle of the street, under the glow of flashing lights. The man who had struck her swallowed hard. He opened his mouth to speak but couldn't find any words. His training told him what he was supposed to do, but his conscience had gone quiet. For the first time in years, he felt completely unsure of himself. The woman looked at the others. "You all saw what happened," she said. "You'll each give your report honestly. No one is to alter or hide a single detail. Understood?" They nodded immediately. No one dared argue. She straightened her jacket slowly, her movement steady, deliberate. There was no anger in her face, only disappointment. "You wear this uniform to protect," she said quietly, glancing at the officer who had hit her. "Not to act out of fear. Not to prove your strength. Remember that." Her calmness only made the guilt weigh heavier. The man felt like the ground beneath him might open up. Every word she spoke dug deeper than any punishment could. His breathing grew shallow, and his throat tightened as he realized how easily his own prejudice had blinded him. One of the younger officers tried to speak, but his voice came out shaky. "Chief," he said softly, as if testing the word, "do you want us to take him in?" The woman turned her gaze toward him. "No," she said after a moment. "Not tonight. We'll handle this the right way, by the book." Her tone was measured but firm. "The department will do what it's supposed to do." The sound of her words settled into the air, and everyone understood what she meant. There would be accountability, but it wouldn't come through rage or revenge. It would come through justice, the kind that didn't need to raise its voice. As the lights from the patrol cars washed over the street, neighbors began to peek through their windows. A few stepped outside, trying to see what was going on. The woman noticed, her expression softening for a moment. She knew what scenes like this did to the community. She knew how quickly trust could shatter. She took a slow breath, then spoke again, her voice carrying across the street. "We're done here. Everyone clear the area. I'll handle the follow-up." The officers hesitated. No one wanted to be the first to move. The man who had caused all this stood frozen, unsure if he should stay or walk away. The woman noticed and stepped closer, stopping just a few feet from him. Her tone softened slightly. "Look at me," she said quietly. He hesitated, then lifted his eyes. What he saw wasn't anger. It was disappointment mixed with something deeper, something he didn't expect. Empathy. "You think this uniform gives you power," she said. "But it doesn't. It gives you responsibility. You failed that tonight. But what you do next will show who you really are." Her words hit harder than any punishment could. He nodded slowly, unable to speak. She gave him a long look before stepping back. "You'll write your statement," she continued. "Then go home. Take time to think about what happened before you come back." He nodded again, his throat dry. "Yes, ma'am," he managed to say, his voice breaking. The others began to move, quietly following her instructions. The flashing lights dimmed one by one as the patrol cars left the scene. Soon, only the woman and the officer remained. For a long time, neither of them said anything. The woman stood with her arms crossed, watching the street return to silence. The cool wind brushed through her hair, carrying away some of the tension. Finally, she turned to him again. "Why did you stop me tonight?" she asked. He hesitated. "You looked out of place," he said, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. She raised an eyebrow. "Out of place?" she repeated softly. "Do you know how many times I've heard that in my life?" He lowered his gaze, shame washing over him. He wanted to apologize, but she wasn't asking for that. Not yet. "I worked my whole career to change how people see this badge," she continued. "And yet even one bad moment like this can destroy that work in seconds. You didn't just hurt me tonight. You hurt the trust we're all supposed to build." Her words hung in the air. He felt them settle deep inside, where excuses couldn't reach. "I thought I was doing my job," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No. You were acting on what you thought you knew about me before I ever spoke a word. That's not your job. That's your bias. And it's something we all have to face if we want to be better." He wanted to argue, to defend himself somehow, but he knew she was right. Every part of him wanted to disappear from that moment. But she wasn't trying to break him. She was trying to make him see. She looked up at the sky for a moment, then back at him. "Do you have family?" she asked. "Yes," he said softly. "2 kids." "Then think about what you'd want them to see in a police officer," she said. "Would you want them to fear someone like you tonight? Or would you want them to trust that officer to protect them?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. The woman took another slow breath. "We can't fix what happened here tonight," she said. "But we can decide what happens after. That's on you now." She turned to leave, walking slowly toward her vehicle. The officer stood still, watching her go. The sound of her footsteps echoed softly against the pavement. Each step felt like a reminder of the distance between who he was and who he needed to become. Before she got into her car, she looked back one last time. "You'll report to my office tomorrow morning," she said calmly. "We're going to talk about what kind of officer you want to be." He nodded again, barely able to hold her gaze. "Yes, Chief." The woman opened her car door and paused, looking around at the quiet neighborhood. The tension from earlier had faded, replaced by a strange calm. She knew this wasn't over. It was only the beginning of a much larger conversation. But it was a start. When she drove away, the man stayed where he was, the sound of her engine fading into the night. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man in control. He felt like someone facing the truth, and as he stood there under the dim streetlight, he finally understood the weight of what he had done, and what it meant to truly serve the people he was supposed to protect. The next morning, the sky was pale and heavy with quiet clouds. The officer barely slept. His mind replayed everything that had happened the night before. Every word, every look, every second of silence after he realized who she was. He had never felt so small in his uniform. The badge that once made him feel proud now felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He woke early, ironed his shirt, polished his shoes, and drove to the station without turning on the radio. The city looked different today, quieter somehow, as if it was watching him. When he arrived, everyone in the department seemed to know. Conversation stopped when he walked by. Some officers avoided his eyes. Others just nodded, unsure what to say. He walked down the hall toward the chief's office. His hands were sweating even though the air was cool. He stopped outside her door, took a deep breath, and knocked. "Come in," her voice said calmly from inside. He stepped in slowly. She was sitting behind her desk, her posture straight, her eyes focused. There was no anger in her face, only quiet strength. She gestured for him to sit. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The clock on the wall ticked softly between them. "Do you know why you're here?" she finally asked. He nodded. "Yes, Chief. Tell me," she said. He swallowed. "Because of what I did last night." She studied him for a moment before speaking. "You made a mistake," she said. "But mistakes are only part of the problem. The real question is, why did you make it? He looked down at his hands. I thought I was following instinct, he said quietly. I saw something and I reacted. Instinct, she repeated. Or assumption. He hesitated. She was right, and he knew it. Assumption, he admitted softly. She leaned forward slightly. That's what we need to talk about. Because assumptions can destroy lives. You wear that badge to see clearly. To see past fear, past bias, past judgment. But you didn't do that last night, he nodded. I know, Chief, I can't stop thinking about it. Good, she said. Because thinking about it means you care. But caring isn't enough. Change comes from what you do after the mistake. She stood and walked toward the window. Sunlight spilled across the floor, soft and golden. I didn't file charges against you, she said quietly. Not because I wanted to protect you, but because I wanted you to face this in a way that matters. Not in a courtroom, but in your conscience. Her words landed heavily. He couldn't bring himself to look up. He had been prepared for punishment, but this was something else entirely. She turned back to him. I want you to attend the community meetings this week, she said. Listen to the people we serve. Hear what they go through, how they see us. Don't defend yourself. Just listen. He nodded slowly. Yes, Chief. And you'll be part of the new training sessions we're starting, she continued. You'll help me teach about accountability and respect in policing. He blinked in surprise. Me? Yes, you, she said simply. Because you've seen both sides now. You know what happens when judgment takes over. You can help others learn before they make the same mistake. He wasn't sure if he deserved that kind of chance. But the way she said it made him believe she wasn't just trying to fix him. She was trying to fix something bigger. They sat in silence for a moment longer. Then she said, There's something else I want you to do. He waited. I want you to apologize, she said. Not to me. To yourself, because what you did last night doesn't have to define you, but you can't move forward until you accept what you've done. Her voice softened. You need to forgive yourself if you're going to change. He nodded again, his voice quiet. I'll do that. She gave a small, tired smile. Good, you may go. He stood and started to leave, but stopped at the door. Chief, he said, thank you for not giving up on me. She looked at him steadily. I don't give up on people who still have the courage to learn. When he left her office, he felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because he had been given a second chance. Heavier because he now understood what it meant to carry it. That evening, he went to the first community meeting. It was held in a small hall on the south side of the city. The room was filled with people, families, elders, young adults. Some looked at him with distrust, others with curiosity. He sat in the back quietly listening. A woman stood up and spoke about how afraid she felt during traffic stops. Another man talked about being pulled over for no reason. The officer sat there, his chest tight, realizing how many stories sounded just like what he had done. Every word stung, but he didn't look away. When the meeting ended, an older man approached him. You one of the officers? The man asked. Yes, sir, he replied quietly. The man studied him for a moment. You look like you're listening, he said. Keep doing that. We've had enough people who don't. The officer nodded, his throat thick. I will. He went to every meeting that week. He didn't speak much. He just listened. Each story peeled away another layer of pride, replacing it with something more important. Understanding. One evening after a meeting, a teenage boy walked up to him. You're the cop from the video, right? The boy asked bluntly. The officer froze. Yes, he said finally. The boy looked at him, arms crossed. You messed up. I did, the officer said quietly. The boy waited for an excuse, but none came. After a moment, he nodded. At least you admit it. Most don't. That small moment felt more real than any apology could. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. By the end of the week, the officer felt different. He wasn't proud of himself, but he was finally facing the truth. Every meeting reminded him why his job mattered, and how easily one bad moment could destroy trust. A few days later, he was called into the chief's office again. She was standing by the same window, looking out at the city. I heard you went to every meeting, she said without turning around. Yes, Chief. Good, she said. Did you learn something? He nodded. I learned that people don't hate the uniform. They hate what happens when it forgets its purpose. She turned to face him, a small smile forming. That's a good answer. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you think they'll ever trust me again?" She took a slow breath. "Trust isn't something you ask for," she said. "It's something you rebuild, one action at a time. If you keep doing the right thing, people will see it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will." He nodded. It was all he needed to hear. Later that evening, he sat in his patrol car, parked near the same street where everything had happened. The neighborhood was quiet. He looked around, remembering that night, the flashing lights, the fear, the shame. But now it felt different. He wasn't there to control. He was there to protect. He turned off the engine and sat in silence, the distant sound of crickets filling the night. For the first time in a long time, he felt something close to peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because he was finally on the path to making it right. The next day, a photo appeared online. Someone had captured him listening at the community meeting, head down, no defense in his eyes. The image spread quickly. But this time, the comments weren't filled with anger. Many people wrote that maybe change was possible after all. Back at the station, the chief saw the photo too. She didn't say anything, but for the first time since that night, she smiled to herself. It wasn't victory, it was progress. And sometimes that was enough to start healing.